So you want to build your own tiny home, do you? Or maybe you're just looking around to learn whether it's for you or to learn more about tiny houses themselves. Now look, I'm not going to be one of these videos where I do these amazing walkthroughs with background music. I'm just going to speak as an experienced carpenter as to my thoughts on tiny homes. Now I'll give you my background first. I've been a carpenter for 20 years, on and off, but like any other trade, when you're a carpenter, you're always doing something. And I've done a lot of high-end work and a lot of, home building, additions and new construction, but mostly remodeling and a lot of custom woodwork in kitchens. And I've learned a lot in the process. As years progressed, eventually I bought a school bus about 4 years ago. My wife and I remodeled it and turned it into our RV, camper. Put in our own custom cabinets and a bed and everything, couches. And during the process, I learned quite a bit about working with mobile objects, let's just say. And a tiny home, even though it's considered to be stationary, is somewhat of a mobile object. Excuse me. Well, about a year ago, I started working for, maybe a little less than that, started working for a tiny home builder. And I've been working with this guy for a while now, and we've just finished our third tiny home. And when I say tiny home, at least the one I've worked on, these are high-end tiny homes. They're like very expensive. They're between, like 80 and 120,000. But these things are built like rocks. We use solid plywood on the outside. We use solid plywood for the walls on the inside instead of sheetrock. We use 2x4 studs and insulate it with rock wool completely, every crevice. It's built on a trailer that's custom made for tiny homes, and they are really well built and well insulated. So, to the point here, there are different people and different classes and groups and I hate to say classes, you know what I mean. People who can afford things and who can afford to spend a hell of a lot more on something, and others who are just looking for something that they can park somewhere that'll get them by. That's more of my style. I mean, I'm frugal and I would prefer to just get something affordable. But the ones we happen to build are high end, and as a finished carpenter, that's something that I love doing. I love building really nice stuff. And a tiny home can be like a piece of furniture by the time it's done. So, not to get too far off here, I wanted to go over a few of the tips that I think and things that I've noticed as a carpenter building tiny homes compared to houses, and a little bit of advice if you're ever going to tackle something like this. The first one is to remember this: everything is in view at all times. And that's something actually one of our customers pointed out the other day, because she has her hammock hanging, and we went to visit to do a few repairs, and she said that she can see everything. And that's why you want to make sure it's done well, right? I mean, they're going to see every single nail hole, every imperfection, because you're basically always in one spot. But we tend to build lofts in ours. And so the next thing is it has to be efficient. And that's why lofts help. It has to be efficient and it has to be functional. You have to be really thinking when you're making a plan. You don't want something that's just going to, just frustrate you because it's laid out improperly. And then the next one is storage. Storage is a huge necessity. That means even under steps going up into lofts, you need to find storage and cubby holes everywhere. Don't waste a single spot. We utilize every square inch when we build one because you have to. And it does cost a little more to build with 2x4 walls, but at the same time, you're getting a lot more insulation. And that's something to consider. They're extremely quiet. Extremely quiet. When they're built properly, you can be inside and not hear anything outside almost. And that's the thing, they're very efficient, which means building up and not out is a great way to expand it, I guess. Something I just wanted to point out. We like to have like a 15-foot, at some ceiling. There's a certain height we can get out of our garage. I don't recall I want to say 13 foot, but at any rate, having a loft up there is nice because you don't have to have it full height. And that definitely helps from having to build it out because you can only build it to a certain size, especially if you're going to drive it or transport it. Um, so, heating is a huge issue. It's important to recognize that you cannot put a full size wood stove in, and it's hard. You can't put hearths and fireplaces that are like rated for much higher, larger place. Just doesn't work. You will end up replacing it and getting frustrated. So you have to get something that's kind of mid-sized, and so heating is something seriously to consider. Um, the next thing is tiny home living means less stuff. That's something that everybody might take as obvious, but to be honest, it's not. It's not heeded by a lot of people. They want to bring everything they have into the tiny home, and you just can't do that. My dog's scratching at the door. I gotta let her in real quick. Okay, Husky's in now. The next tip here. Okay, the last one was living tiny means less. I mean, I can't stress that enough. You should have some sort of an outside storage to put other things in because they can be very small. But, that's for each person to decide how they live. Uh, the next one is be aware of zoning and codes. This is an interesting one because some places just don't care. You park whatever you want, wherever you want. I mean, it's why my wife and I were looking at spots in Kentucky and other states. We live in the Pacific Northwest, and we tend to have a little bit stricter zoning regulations. Not as bad as California, God forbid. That place is horrendous for some of their, rules for building. But, it can be good in environmentally sensitive areas, but in general, it just, makes it very difficult. If you want to just park a tiny home on your land, a lot of places won't allow it. They say, oh, well, we don't know how to handle this. That's another thing. When they're coming, the inspectors, we do these inspections through, usually, they're not even visual. You use video chat and you walk through and you show them, what you've got. You show them the electrical, the plumbing, and then you pass inspection, then you can seal it up. And cities haven't quite figured out how to handle that. The whole issue of, do we code them like houses or like mobile homes or RVs? So that's up to your area, and you'll have to figure out what that entails. And you should look into that before you plan on building one, because if you have a plan on putting it somewhere, it might not be allowed. The next issue is form versus function. A lot of people, everyone loves beauty, but be aware that form versus function, in the sense that you might want to design something that's very aesthetically appealing, but that just doesn't work the way you want it. And you're very tight on space, so you have to make it work. And that includes cabinet space, what drawers you choose, what furniture you put in there, everything. So be aware of that. We use removable tables that can lift off, and then you can widen up the room. But that's something to consider as well. Fold down tables, pop up tables, countertops that can be closed off, or stoves that can be covered to use that rest of that counter space. You really have to consolidate when you live tiny. And also options. You want options. You want something that might be modular. You could even go with something modular. If you consider designing your own and you're going to build your own, you could add certain components that can be moved around, like tables that can be put in other areas, or dual use. Just do a lot of thinking and research on that, and there's a lot online. Another huge issue to consider is when you're parking a tiny home. It's the final issue I want to talk about. When you pull something out there, like for example, one final note is, we do, for example, inset doors, and those are cabinet doors where when you close them, they're flush with the trim around them. So there's the little gap, rather than one that closes over, like a lap door. And that's a little tricky, because when you're driving that thing and you park it, if one wheel is even slightly off from the way it was, and they do have jacks, yes, 4 jacks, one on each corner, where you can jack it up to where you want it, and then the front jack, and they usually are dual axle. But still, if you don't have a pad that is sufficient to hold something up of that weight, then it's just going to sink. And this is very common. And then it might start leaning one direction, and then maybe, you know, maybe you'd have issues with water running in or something. And so it's important to make sure it's put level on a pad. And that's something we have to work around with warranties. Like, you want to warranty a product, but it has to be put in the right place. And another bit of advice is awnings, because, you know, they don't generally come with porches, and a lot of people just kind of have a front door on there, and you can't drive with an awning, so usually that's something that comes later. Make sure you build one. And, you know, a level and solid pad cannot be overstated. It's very key. So I guess I just wanted to go over those things that I'd learned. When it comes to the carpentry aspect, you know, it's wonderful because you're putting so much custom finished carpentry into one spot. You know, like 14 windows in one tiny house with a full kitchen, a full bathroom, you know, all the amenities, and you're always working in the same spot. So there's benefits to it. I guess for any carpenters out there working in the tiny home industry, the advantage is that you can go to work at the same place every day. And that's also a disadvantage because we like to travel. We did some repairs. We drove out to John Day, out by the fossil beds the other day to do a repair. It took us like 6 hours to get there. It was a long journey. And then we went out to Sandy yesterday to do a couple more, you know, looking into something and adding. There's some issue with the air conditioner. We're going to had to seal it up for the winter. So you will be busy doing, you know, maybe some checkups, but generally you're working in the same warehouse every day, all the time, you know. And if you like doing that, I kind of do, because you keep the garage door closed, turn on the heater, crank up some tunes, and you're in your environment all day, you know, no customer in the way. You're just building a house in a warehouse. It is a weird thing. So that's my discussion about that, and I hope you learned something, and hope it helps somebody out there who might be wanting to get one. And yeah, if anybody in the Portland area or anywhere outside of there, you know, wants one, let us know. Hit me up in the comments, and I'll get you in touch with our company. It's just me and one other guy, my boss, Rick, and it's his company, and we do high quality work. So with that, I'm over and out. Take care, my friends.